back to DotLife, Dorchester's hyperlocal source of news, content, and analysis in podcast format. We are here with Bill Forry, and you are all in green today, Bill.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And you're smiling.
It's a green screen. I am smiling. That was a great game last night. We're back in it 3-2. Celtics, Knicks. The Knicks fans are so effing obnoxious too. And I'm sorry, I know you have New York roots.
Not New York City.
Not New York City,
No.
but close enough. And listen, after Tatum went down, and it was so demoralizing to have that victory last night.
I was actually, when I heard that news, I was like, oh, I got to talk to Bill this week. He's going to be so sad.
The whole city was, and that the mood today is really changed, and I'm feeling good about going to Madison Square Garden and grabbing one back and then winning it in Game 7 on our home court. I think it's going to happen, Aaron.
You were lucky we don't shoot in front of a green screen.
I was thinking the same. We can do the weather.
Yeah.
It's raining today, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Celtics victory always puts a smile on my face. I think we're going to win you over eventually. I mean, you don't have a basketball
I'm wide
team.
open. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yep.
All right.
You gotta win me over on basketball in general.
So if they beat the Knicks in 7, you're going to root for them. You're going to start wearing green?
I actually have a Celtics shirt.
All right, let's go.
I can wear it.
Smoke them if you got them.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
The Vegas Golden Knights got burned last night by the Edmonton Oilers. Did you watch that
Those sound
game?
familiar.
Yeah.
No, I did not.
Okay.
I did not. I was
Yeah,
definitely watching something
I'm telling
else.
you, you are missing out. It is one incredible NHL playoffs.
Okay,
There's
well, if they're
nothing like
still
playoff
going
hockey.
after the Celtics win the championship, then
They
maybe.
won't be.
Okay.
Yeah. No, they won't
I'm
be.
sorry, you're not going to get my attention then.
Well, what are you doing this weekend? Anything fun?
My son's graduating from Boston College High School.
Yay!
Connor Forry.
Go Connor.
Congrats, Connor. He's the latest in the line of Forry men to graduate from across the street, Marcy Boulevard. So
That's exciting.
That's where we'll be on Saturday and celebrating his accomplishments. And he's off to Boston College in the fall.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And how did John do on his exams?
Good question. We should call him up.
Yeah. You want to do it right now? No.
Yeah, let's get him up. He needs to be on next week because I
Okay.
think he's done now.
Okay.
And then he can fill us all in
He's got some time.
on YouTube and Spotify. Everybody wants to know how John Forry did in his finals.
Bated breath. Yeah,
Yep.
definitely. I've got family coming into town. My parents,
Oh,
my sister and her husband, 3 nieces. So it's
Wow.
going to be a full house.
yep. And then everyone's getting ready for Dorchfest. Are they going
Yeah.
to be helping you?
No, they're probably going to be hindering, to be honest with you.
It's coming. A lot of buzz on Dorchfest increasingly, and the parade now. We're
Yeah.
starting to get real. We're 2 weeks out.
Now it's just weather watch time, which is the most.
We're getting the rain
Yeah.
out of the system right now.
That's what I keep saying. May, just get it done. Yeah.
That's how it's supposed to be.
Well, we've got some breaking news. Well, not breaking news, but some news this week that we want to cover. One is the daily table closure. I was very surprised when I heard that news. It came out of,
Yeah.
for me at least, came out of left field. I did not see that
Do
coming.
you use the daily table?
I have been, but I don't go
Yeah.
often. I think it's a great resource. It was a great asset for our community.
People loved it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was open for 10 years,
Yeah.
basically.
In
And
Codman.
In Codman. That's
Originally.
the original store on Washington Street. And unfortunately, after we taped last week's show, a few hours later, we found out that the Daily Table has closed now all of its remaining locations. Which,
Pretty abruptly.
Yeah, it did. Well, there was a warning sign back in January when they closed the store in Mattapan Square.
Yeah.
But that was a newer store, and it was in the Loop building that's there on River Street. And when that closed, that was kind of like a bad omen
Yeah.
that there might be more problems. But of course, everybody who has retail connections to the nonprofit side right now is really worried.
Of course. Yeah.
Our front page of the Repoter this week is all about, nonprofits getting hit hard and losing funding for various things. And Daily Table is one of them that was kind of put on notice in recent months that, look, some of the funding that comes through the agricultural department, SNAP benefits,
Right.
other things that are really drivers for their customer base are going to be probably off the table in the coming months, coupled with other problems they were already experiencing with supply side and just the economics of running a small grocery store
Yeah.
in the city. They've been struggling, and the board, from what we've been told, and Bill Walczak wrote a column for us in this week's Reporter, he's a board member,
Yeah.
and was one of the people who helped attract Daily Table to Cobbin Square. Bill's obviously the former head of the Cobbin Square Health Center, and they're the landlord of the building.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a lot of connections there locally, but he said really the board was asked to make a responsible decision to help sort of wind things down before it became really impossible to operate. They had debts they wanted to pay down
Yeah.
to vendors and other things. So I think they probably, from the board perspective, did the responsible thing. From the customer perspective, it did feel abrupt.
Yeah.
But
And such a whole, I mean, that area doesn't have a grocery store. It's a food desert, as Bill mentions in his column. I actually am working on an episode on food deserts in general in a few weeks, so hopefully we'll dig into that a little bit more. But what are folks going to do? I mean, that's a big loss.
It is a big loss. And to your point, the reason that Cobbin Square site was selected was because there really is a food desert other than that. And let's remember the concept behind Daily Table. Doug Rauch, who started it back in 2015, was the CEO of Trader Joe's for like 20 years.
Which I didn't know. That's pretty cool.
And when he came to the Kennedy Business School on like a fellowship back then, and came up with the model for Daily Table because he was frustrated as a grocery vendor or operator at how much waste he saw in the industry and how much food, as it neared its expiration date, they had to toss.
Yeah.
So the Daily Table's novel approach was to capture that market of food that was kind of getting near expiration, producing it into ready to eat meals and affordably, and then also, getting discounts from farms and producers closer to home, and then presenting it to a consumer base that, as you said, is sort of like, trapped in this food desert.
And they focus only on healthy foods, so no sugar enhanced beverages, no desserts, no candies, things like that.
Right. Yeah, and so that was a limited market, but people who went there loved it. As you mentioned, like they have a loyal following. Unfortunately, a lot of these federal cuts that are coming down the pipeline or that have already kicked in. There was a grant they tried to get last year that they didn't get. It wasn't even a Trump era thing. It was under Biden actually, but they didn't get a grant that they were counting on, and that impacted them across several of the stores, including Mattapan, which ended up closing.
I think Bill's point in the article that he wrote was that it was a novel idea to the point where the IRS wasn't fully understanding how to categorize it, and possibly grants also. It's not a common thing to give money to.
Right. It's become they obviously figured out the business model there. It's been around for 10 years and they were able to expand. One of the stores is in Salem that just closed, unfortunately, Nubian Square, and there's one in Cambridge that just closed too. So it's sad to see, and unfortunately, as Chris Lovett writes in a longer piece we have on this week's Repoter, all of the nonprofit entities locally are really bracing for this kind of retraction as they have to deal with, the likelihood of substantial holes in their budget.
Right. Bill Walczak is also the front man for Seven Hillbillies. I don't know if you know that.
Yes, I did know. I've seen him in action. They're quite good actually.
They are. They'll be at Dorchfest.
Dorchfest.
They'll be at the Adams Street Library.
Awesome. Yeah, they hold it down with they definitely have the Americana kind of bluegrass thing going
banjo,
on.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, Bill's a very talented guy. He really is kind of a Renaissance man, in addition to starting the Cobbin Square Health Center with other volunteers back in the 1970s, helping to get Cobbin Academy started, and Daily Table, among other things. He's got his hands in all sorts of, not to mention he ran for mayor of Boston.
And he runs the Civic in Savin Hill, right? I think
he has been the president of the Savin Hill Civic lately. So
busy guy.
And he writes a column for us. I don't know how he does it.
I don't either. So shifting from Daily Table, let's talk a little bit about other electeds now that we've mentioned some electeds already. You have an article in the paper this week kind of previewing what we might be seeing in a few months.
Yeah, well, it's getting close to the deadline where there's 75 candidates for various city offices running right now or planning to run. You got to get signatures to get nominated and get on the ballot.
Yeah.
So there's a handful of people in addition to Michelle Wu and Josh Kraft running for mayor at the moment. Or when I say running, they're collecting signatures.
Have stated their intention to run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And get on the mayoral ballot, you need 3,000 signatures. To get on the city council at large, you need 1,500.
Okay.
And to get on a district council seat ballot, you have to only get 200. So it's a pretty wide array there. But as we wrote this week, there's a lot of activity. And from my perspective, somebody who's covered political races in the city going back a long time, 30 years now, this is a pretty good clip of competition. Some years you would see, especially at the district level, councilors going unopposed entirely. And if, a critical mass of these folks do make the ballot, there's a likelihood here of all the city councilors at the district level having at least one opponent.
Yeah.
And at the at-large level, same. Like it'll be plenty of candidates to field for a preliminary election, which is in September. Mm-hmm. And then the top 8 in the at-large will go on into November. What's interesting this week, a couple of developments locally. Frank Baker, who formerly represented District 3, is actively collecting signatures to run at large, which was a surprise.
He stepped down 2 years ago?
He did. He stepped down. John Fitzgerald, who was on DotLife Pod last week. Very interesting interview with him, by the way.
Thank you.
John Fitzgerald is himself facing 2 potential opponents at the moment.
Okay.
Who are gathering signatures. John has been certified for the ballot already.
Oh, yes. Good.
Yeah. And, there was a report last week in one of the Boston newspapers that suggested maybe Frank Baker would challenge John Fitzgerald for his old seat. And that just didn't compute.
No.
And I think that was way off. But Frank Baker is running and is likely to make the ballot, I think, for at large. He has a pretty, tried and true group of hardcore volunteers from his district days.
Yeah.
Frank is a well-known quantity. He can be polarizing, you either love him or hate him kind of thing. But Frank has a column of supporters, especially in District 3, who should make him getting on the ballot not a problem. Even though he kind of signed up late.
Yeah.
He signed up last week.
Yeah.
And people had already been collecting signatures for like 3 weeks. He should get his 1,500, no problem. We won't know for sure for another couple of weeks probably, because the city technically has until like June 23rd to certify people on the ballot. But Frank's an interesting character for a lot of reasons. One is, he's been a more conservative voice on the council when he served from 2011 to 2023. He was known as kind of a contrarian. Even among councilors he had alliances with, he was kind of a wild card. He would often vote off from the rest of the council when they would vote unanimously on a subject, or would. Frank was the one to vote off often.
It's kind of surprising to me, honestly, that he would want to go back to his old job. He took a year and a half off and now decided he missed it, or what? I would think you'd want to try something else.
We have asked, and we haven't really got the firm answer yet. And on his social media platform, he said that he's heard from former constituents that they want him back. I suspect part of it is that Frank sees an opportunity with Josh Kraft challenging Michelle Wu of sort of riding some coattails there.
Yeah, definitely.
He's been out on the stump with Josh Kraft. He's been, obviously supportive of him. He's no fan of Michelle Wu's.
Yeah.
He's not a big fan of the sort of council leadership right now. And when you look at the field of people who are running for at-large council, there may be room for somebody like that. Erin Murphy, who is an incumbent councilor from Dorchester in at large, and is running for re-election. I think it's safe to say she's a pretty safe bet for re-election. She finished second overall last time in the balloting.
But she also ran for another position recently.
She did. She ran for a registry position.
Yeah.
I believe it was Registry of Deeds.
For the state?
It's a county position.
County, okay.
And she did not win that race, but she didn't have to give up her council seat to run.
Yeah.
So she stayed on the council and is running for re-election. Clearly, when you look at the larger field, though, a lot would, I think, align with more of a progressive side, probably, competing with the likes of Ruth C. Louis-Jouen, Julia Mejia, Henry Santana. And 2 years ago, Michael Flaherty, who chose not to run for re-election, sort of late in the game exited the field, and Santana, who also lives in Dorchester, and has the mayor's backing then and now, got that fourth seat.
Okay.
So I think Frank Baker's probably making the calculus that there's an opportunity there, and if he can sort of align himself with Josh Kraft, whether or not Kraft wins,
Right.
you
At
know,
least he's getting some publicity from that, although Frank doesn't necessarily need much help to get.
And you get 4
publicity.
votes, don't forget, for at-large.
Right.
So
Right.
For new voters in the city, you know, you get 4 at-large votes that you can use. You can just do 1, or you can do up to 4. And then for your district councilor, you can only vote for 1.
Okay.
But Frank has that option there of making the case that, you know, give me and Aaron a vote, for example. And there's a route there, I think.
Yeah, I think there is too.
It'll be interesting. And I have to mention District 7, where there's 17 people right now
That's wild.
collecting nomination signatures.
Do you think
in
everybody
T7.
watched that episode with me and Brandy Fluker-Reed and Joel Richards, where we talked about you just got to run for office, and
That's
they said
why
yes?
this is
I
happening.
knew
It's
it.
all your fault. The election commissioners are going to be pissed.
They are. I know.
You know how many
Sorry,
signatures they have to
guys.
certify now?
But I will say, you know, I might not love all of these candidates, but it is good to see people participating and having competition. That's always a good thing.
I agree. I mean, we've had cycles where, especially at the district level, there's no opponents.
Yeah.
And I think that was true of Frank Baker on a few occasions where he ran unopposed. And, you know, the spouses out there are going to hate me. They're going to like, Bill, you know the drill, man. Like, I was in their shoes where, you know, my wife Linda was an elected official. Honestly, I'd be rooting against having an opponent, obviously, because there goes your summer with family stuff. But, you know, from the constituent perspective and, you know, just being a good citizen, it's healthy.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
it helps elevate. It helps people. It makes people hustle. It also helps them in the long run. Candidates may or may not believe this, but, you know, having a test for their organization is a good thing.
Totally.
Especially
Yes.
if they want to run for something else, a higher office. Like, you know, how do you know the real depth and breadth of your support unless you can test it against like a competent opponent?
Right.
And it looks, from the looks of it, and I want to bring up D7 again. This is the seat that Tanya Fernandez Anderson apparently is not going to, you know, is going to leave behind. She hasn't resigned yet, but she doesn't seem to be running for re-election either. So this will be an open seat.
There's no way she would win re-election, right?
You know what?
That cannot happen here.
I think it. You know, honestly, I'm not going to say no. I mean, she has a column of supporters, and in a race where, you know, you have a field of 17 people, you know, people can cross each other up. But
I know. How am I saying anything can't happen in politics?
it can
I mean, come
happen.
on.
Yeah. Look at where we are nationally. But in District 7, we now have, like, there's several candidates in that group of 17 who are pretty compelling and have a narrative and a story that I think is going to be an interesting one. And you got to say, like, for that volume of people to be running for a district council seat in Boston is encouraging.
Yeah.
It really is. Roxbury and Dorchester seat, it includes parts of Upham's Corner, the Dudley Triangle, but it's based in, you know, in Nubian Square in Dudley.
And some really key
South End.
issues in that area that need a strong voice.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons that Tanya Fernandez Anderson says she hasn't left yet is, you know, she wants to make sure they have representation through the budget process. You know, I don't think I agree with her position, but at the end of the day, you know, this quest for new blood to come in and represent is drawing some compelling people to this race so far. So we'll see. I think we're going to do a lot of coverage. I'm sure you'll be talking about it from time to time, but in the Reporter, we've invited the candidates who are running to write op-eds already to say, introduce yourselves to the voters. You know, we want to hear. We're doing that, by the way, across the board with all the seats.
Yeah. Okay. Open invitation if you want to be on DotLife Pod. Aaron at DotLife Pod.
Cool.
Drop me a note.
Great.
We'll fit in as many as we can.
Yeah.
One person who will not, sadly, be in office this coming couple of months is Walter.
Walter the dog. But man,
How does a dog lose anything?
well, he ran into a really good candidate, which is, you know,
okay.
every good candidate's nightmare is somebody who's even better. And that's Bridget McDonough, who is going to be the next mayor of Dorchester. We confirmed that before coming on the show today. The committee had a meeting, I think it was Monday night, and you know, the mayor of Dorchester is a contest. It's not an election, right? Although it kind of works like real elections in that the person who raises the most money
Typically
wins usually, right? So it's kind of checks out. But this is all for a good cause, and it's to help pay for the Dorchester Day Parade and the activities around it. From what we've been told from Brianne Gore, who's the head of the parade committee or one of the key people on it, together the various mayor candidates this year raised over $25,000 for the parade, which is awesome.
That's great.
Like, I think Walter the dog and his team, Jenna is his mom.
Yeah.
I think it's Jenna Taylor, who did a great job and ran a very interesting campaign with Walter, who I think is a golden
I think so.
Yeah. Cute dog. And they raised like $10,000.
That's awesome.
And they did a couple of cool events and gift certificates. Apparently, Bridget McDonough, who is a Savin Hill resident, and she and her husband have 2 kids. She's a personal trainer at a gym on Dorchester Avenue called Dotbox, which is a very popular spot near Savin Hill Ave.
Is she the goodest girl? Is she a good girl?
I haven't met Bridget.
Does she take pets?
No, I don't know if she has a dog, but she may. She and Walter probably should be walking together.
They
in
really
the parade.
should.
They both did a great job, but there's got to be a winner, and apparently Bridget and her team raised over $10,000.
If I beat a dog in a contest, I would never. I would never stop telling people I'm more appealing than a dog.
I was worried for whoever's going to lose to Walter too. It's kind of tough. But when you saw the campaign, and if you go on Walter has his own Instagram account, of course.
Yes.
And you can follow, and you can still donate, by the way, to these candidates, even though the contest technically is over. There's a winner. You can still make a donation. It's all goes to the parade,
which is incredible.
None of this is for snacks for Walter, or for Bridget, or for Jean Gorman, who ran too. And Jean, I heard, raised a few $1,000s as well.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Jean, and to everybody who helped out. It all goes to put bands on the streets.
Yeah.
And as you know, for organizing Dorchfest the last several years, that's no easy task.
No.
Like getting even people who love this neighborhood and just to ask them for a couple $100s to pay for help pay for a band or whatever, a float, like a truck to carry the kids on the parade.
Yeah.
It all costs money, and it's like $50K a year.
Yeah.
The city kicks in some money. They have to help with the police details, and it's to shut down Dorchester Ave for like 4 hours.
It adds up very quickly. Yeah.
But it's good news. Sunday, June 1st, 1 p.m., Dorchester Ave, Lower Mills to Columbia Road.
Rain or shine.
You know where to go. And it looks like, it's from what I've heard from Brianne Gore, they have a great lineup of live music for this show. The day after Dorchfest.
Yeah, if you can rouse yourself after an amazing party at Dorchfest, then you should go to that day parade. Absolutely.
It's a whole weekend commitment.
Yeah. It's going to be fun. It's going to be great weather. We're guaranteeing that.
There you go. You heard it here.
I didn't vote for Walter. I felt like Humphrey would get very mad at me if I voted for another dog.
Humphrey?
My dog.
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't think I've met Humphrey.
You haven't. No, but he's worth meeting. He's great.
Maybe they should just have a whole subcategory and like a dog exclusive competition next year.
They should. That's a really good idea.
Let's do it. Brianne, let's make it happen.
You heard it.
Okay.
Last thing that we have to talk about today is related to none of these things. It's actually about vaping.
Yeah.
Seth teased this a couple weeks ago when he was here, but he wasn't able to join us. So can you give us the lowdown on what's going on with kids and the vapes?
Sure. This is all news to me because I'm not on Snapchat. So that's
Nor am I.
probably for the best. But apparently there's so just a step back, there's a group in Cobham Square that's been active for really decades now on the subject of, they're an anti-tobacco group.
Okay.
It's called the Bold Teens Breath of Life Dorchester.
Okay.
Bold Teens, and Cynthia Lesh Johnson, who's now herself a mom, but as a teenager was active in organizing this. Their concern was really the profound health impacts from smoking, and especially among young people, and how they were at the time back in the 80s, 90s in Dorchester. A lot of stores were targeting kids, and kids could easily flaunt the law, so they helped sort of crack down on retail sales. And of course, now at the state level, you can't buy cigarettes in a lot of these stores.
No.
But the kids have figured it out, as they always will.
Kids are smart. Devious.
Underground market, and the bold teens of today, through a research grant that they got, have been sort of canvassing how are kids getting nicotine products, vapes, and cannabis products.
And the answer is New Hampshire.
Yeah, it's always got to do
always
with New
New
Hampshire.
Hampshire.
Yeah, exactly.
Live free or die.
It's just a new way of getting it there, which
Yeah.
is, enterprising young people, mostly themselves underage, advertising on Snapchat, other social apps, and targeting their fellow teens, fellow
I didn't
kids.
know Snapchat was still so popular. What a world. Who knew?
Not really that familiar with it, but
No.
I read Seth's piece and I had to edit it, so now I know. They put up on their stories, messages here, with a list of prices, and within a matter of minutes, you get matched up with whoever's got, what you need.
And then they'll actually deliver it to you.
Yeah, they'll usually on a scooter,
Yeah.
one of the little scooters that's bringing all of us food or
Yeah.
whatever. Same concept. The problem here, obviously, is it's illicit trade.
Right.
These are underage kids and sellers, and as you said, people usually are going to New Hampshire, bringing it in, and then making a profit off these sales. The concern from the bold teen side is, they want their peers to understand the health risks. I mean, there's a reason that tobacco products are banned for especially young kids, the addiction issue,
Yeah.
and also the health impact. So Cynthia and the team of kids that she has assembled now, they've been working on it. And in today's Repoter, you can read about it more.
Yeah.
The Boston Public Health Commission and their officials are aware of the problem. Not much you can do, right?
No.
I mean, it's a systemic problem. And interestingly, the kids who Seth quoted in the piece were talking about how, this was really a suburban issue until more recently from their observations. Like,
Why do you think that is? Why didn't it make it to the city until recently?
I'm not really sure. I think, that was part of the story that didn't really get unwrapped quite yet.
Yeah.
But I think what Seth and what we wanted to do this week is kind of surface it,
Yeah.
give these kids some credit. They're the ones kind of surfacing themselves, sort of self-reporting
Yeah.
on this.
And they caught people, right? Like they would respond to the Snapchat ads and go find the seller.
The seller would come to them, they would buy it, and then they would
Yeah.
turn it over to the adults who
That's
were
pretty
involved
cool.
in that. So, and look, I'm sure there's people there, they're snitching on. Nobody got snitched on. Nobody
Yeah.
got dimed out. It's just they want to surface it as an issue and
Yeah.
let folks know, look, as a consumer, you should be aware. This is unhealthy. It's not a
Right.
good idea, and here's why. So it's not a law enforcement thing.
Yeah.
It's more of a public health matter.
Is the smoking age for both tobacco and cannabis in Mass 21?
It is.
It
It's
is,
21,
okay.
yeah,
'Cause it
for
used to
adult
be-
use cannabis.
Did it used to be 18 here, or is that just in New York
I
State?
think it used to be 18 back in the day, but it's no longer.
Okay.
Yeah. So anybody under 21, who's getting their hands on tobacco, they're getting some help there.
Yeah, right. Okay. Wow. What's coming up next week?
Yeah, well, I know that you're talking some more this week about the Ashmont Hill Yard Sale. We'll
Yes.
be doing coverage of that for next week. Tonight, we're recording on a Thursday. Tonight's the Dot House Health Annual Dot Fest, which is always a good party they're having. And then we're doing a lot of run-up to Dot Day coverage. You can read more about Bridget McDonough next week in the Reporter. And, then we're quickly into full-on Dorchfest,
Yes.
wall-to-wall coverage of bands. We'll be back here. We're recording this at the Record Company, which is a fantastic resource for artists here in this part of the city and really citywide. But
Yeah.
we're lucky to have them here in Dorchester, and a lot of their artists will be profiling ahead of Dorchfest. And
Actually,
letting
next
folks know.
week we'll have Bobby Boyd on and
Nice.
a few other folks who can talk about artist spaces and the importance of having places like this here in Boston.
Yeah,
So,
and Bobby
yeah,
lives in
good.
Dorchester.
Yeah.
I mean, what a great guy. And he's opened up his space here to help us produce this, help you produce
Yeah.
this, and
Yep.
bring this to a bigger audience. So thanks, Bobby.
Yes, love it. Cool. Well, have a great weekend. Go Celtics.
I'm going to have a great weekend. A great weekend.
Did you notice I didn't even couch it this time? I just said go Celtics. You're winning me over.
Yes. All right. Well, I'm doing it for the whole city. Everybody's counting on you, Aaron. We need
I'm
all the
here.
help we can get.
I'm not gonna watch, but I'm here.
All right.
I'll be
Well,
watching.
enjoy your hockey.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever.
Oh, by the way, NFL schedule came out.
I heard that.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that one. I only saw the Detroit schedule.
We play you guys really early this year. We play you in Buffalo, I think the 5th of October, and then in New England early November. So no snow games this year.
Okay.
Probably.
Well, I mean, Buffalo, it starts snowing in September, doesn't it?
It could. Yeah.
So
definitely.
let's not
You
get
never
ahead of
know.
ourselves
You
here.
never know. How are you feeling about Drake May?
I'm not super confident.
Okay.
No, I've got to be honest about
Really?
that. Yeah.
He's got a lot of buzz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't plugged into the Patriots psyche yet for the new season, so
I mean, he's not Mac Jones, so
No.
he's got that going for him.
no, it was definitely an improvement, but they got a ways to go, and hopefully they're. I heard you and Seth really dissecting the O-line and
Yeah.
diving deep into the Patriots depth chart. But
You guys finally got some protection there for Drake.
That's what we need.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks,
Well,
Aaron.
have a great rest of your week.
You too.
Thanks. Welcome back to DotLife. We are starting the first of our multi-part series, which is diving into the specific neighborhoods of Dorchester. And we're starting this series with Ashmont Hill. We are joined today by Vicki Rugo. Hi, Vicki.
Hi, thanks for having us.
And Joe Gildea. Hi, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you both for joining. The reason we started with Ashmont Hill, and we'll talk a little bit more about how you two are involved in the neighborhood, but want to start with letting folks know that tomorrow is a really important event at Ashmont Hill, and this is the Ashmont Hill Yard Sale. And we're going to talk more deeply about the yard sale a little bit later in the segment, but just to kick off, Joe, do you want to tell us the date, time, what people can expect from the yard sale?
Yes, it's tomorrow, May 17th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. But a lot of the people are set up at 7 a.m. because of the early bird buyers usually come in the first hour. And so it's good to be out there early.
Okay, great. And it's going to be a beautiful day.
Yes.
Fingers crossed. Before we get into more details about the yard sale, though, Vicki, we really want to explore Ashmont Hill. I think it's a small neighborhood in Dorchester, and it's kind of tucked away a little bit behind the, behind the T station up in Ashmont. So tell us a little bit more about what is Ashmont Hill? What are the boundaries there?
Okay, well, Ashmont Hill is actually between Ashmont Station and Peabody Square and Codman Square. Those are sort of the two, ends of it. The official boundaries for our neighborhood association, anyway, are Ashmont Street, Washington Street, Burt Street, which is a block up from Wells Avenue, and Talbot Avenue, which takes you back down to Peabody Square. The development history of the neighborhood really explains why it's shaped the way it is. In the late 19th century, actually in 1870, Dorchester was annexed to the city of Boston, having been a separate town since its founding in 1630. And it was very good timing on the part of one young man named George Derby Wells, who in 1870 inherited from his grandfather a large piece of land that included what's now Ashmont Hill, plus some additional land that was a little bit to the east and then over on the other side of Washington Street. And George had been was in Paris. He had graduated from Harvard in 1862, and he went off to Paris, where other family members had started a banking business, and he had relatives, and he was living over there. And actually, he never came back to Dorchester or Boston on a permanent basis. He married a French woman and lived his whole life there. Anyway, so in 1870, he inherited all of this land, and he hired a man named what's his name? Edward Ingersoll Brown, who was an attorney, to manage his affairs here. Edward Ingersoll Brown was also the person who gave the Brown Fund to the city of Boston later on, so he was, pretty well off financially as well. So Brown hired a surveyor called H.W. Wilson to do a plan of house lots for this property to begin selling real estate.
This is like the first Boston subdivision, is it?
No, not well. He was not alone. A lot of people in the 19th century owned and acquired very large pieces of land. Most of it was actually agricultural, unless it was along either the harbor or the river, where it was either boat building or
industrial,
mill, like the Lower Mills Baker Chocolate. But there were a lot of people who owned large swaths of land, and when 1870 arrived, a lot of people started hiring surveyors and laying out house lots and selling these lots. So this happened with the Wilson plan, and as you can see, it was a lot of very small house lots. So lots of times someone would come in and they would buy not one or two, but they would buy 5 because they wanted a big lot. And a lot of other people came in who acted as developers who would buy even larger pieces. And sometimes they would actually reconfigure them to make them more saleable because, I don't know, it sort of looked like they thought it was going to be another Back Bay or something because it was very small, narrow lots. So anyway, so development started in the early 1870s. And George Derby Wells had houses built at the T intersections. One of the things that's distinctive about the neighborhood is it has several intersections where you get to the end of the street. It's a T, you have to turn right or left. But he had mansard cottages built that were very much the style of the 1870s coming from Paris. And you could see these houses from lots of different angles. So it was a way of kind of promoting what the neighborhood would look like when it got further developed. So, and the other thing that Wells did was he put a lot of what you might call deed restrictions or stipulations in the deeds that, houses had to be set back either 10 or 20 feet from the street, which is one of the reasons why you have this kind of consistent streetscape on all of the streets in the neighborhood. He had, they could only be single-family houses, or in some cases later on, when other developers came along, they would say, it could be a 2-family house. There couldn't be more than, one barn. The setback could. You could have your steps come into the setback area or a porch or whatever, but not the main part of the house. And the other thing,
and he was able to do this separate from the Boston government.
There was no zoning.
There was no zoning at all.
There was no zoning. So, and this was a very typical approach that a lot of people when we've done histories of other houses in Dorchester, it was very typical of these large landowners who were then selling off their property to put various similar kinds of restrictions on the deeds that would run for 10 years, 20 years, whatever. And then even when the land was sold to someone else, those requirements would carry over.
Okay.
In a number of cases. The other thing that was kind of interesting was that the deed also said that if anybody violated this, Wells or his representatives had the right to go in and make the person who had been the offender undo their work.
Oh, wow.
Which I suspect never happened, but it was kind of a,
it's a daunting threat, though.
something to hold over people.
Yeah.
But everybody was pretty obedient. So development got started in the 1870s. It progressed through 1880s, 1890s. There were there was various ups and downs financially that affected when houses were built. So you have a few 1870 houses, more 1880s houses, a lot of houses in the 1890s and into the early 1900s.
It's notable that when you drive through that neighborhood, you see a lot of the historical plaques on the houses. There's a lot of history there.
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. So because of the different time periods, during that last part of the 19th century, you get a number of different styles that were in fashion at the various, during these various periods. So you go from, French mansard to stick style to, Queen Anne and colonial revival, and also shingle style, which is one of the really interesting styles that we have a lot of houses in that style, most of which were designed by an architect named Edwin J. Lewis, Jr., who was a master of the shingle style.
So, we've talked about the boundaries and how the geo and the architecture came to be, but talk a little bit about what were the types of people that were living there? Was it mostly people who lived and worked in Boston proper? Was it agriculture? What was the?
Well, it wasn't agricultural anymore.
Okay.
As I said earlier, most of Dorchester, except for the industrial parts, was agriculture, and there were people actually, what you might call gentlemen farmers, who they were wealthy because they were bankers or whatever, but they also had large pieces of land, and they did they hybridized fruit and they raised prize-winning cattle and all of those kinds of things. This sort of was before 1870 when real estate was everything. Boston was growing very rapidly by 1870, so the part of the attraction of annexing Dorchester was to have more land for more people to live on, and real estate development was sort of the biggest game in town.
And this is around the same time the Back Bay was being filled in.
Back
right?
Bay started in the 1850s and
Okay.
continued in, but Roxbury was annexed to Boston in 1868. South Boston had been added, so the city was growing both.
JP was around the same
Jamaica
time?
Plain was, so the city grew both by annexation and by landfill. So
Okay.
the Back Bay, East Boston, South Boston, and around the North Station area, there was a lot of landfill going on, but also and then Hyde Park, I think, was not until, I don't know, 1930, something like that.
Okay.
For Boston to become the city that it is
Yeah.
today.
So who was living there?
So people, well, actually, it's interesting because a lot of the early property owners were people who were in the shoe business.
Okay.
The leather industry in Boston, along with textiles, was very important. So that there were several of the people who built big houses and developed parts of the neighborhood on their own.
There's a lot of big shoe money.
Were shoe money, right? Exactly. But it was a real range. One of the things that I was looking up in some of the house histories that I should put in a plug for the Dorchester Historical Society's house history program,
Yeah.
which I'll tell a little bit more about that
Yeah.
in a little bit. But there were a lot of artists. It was, there was a man named Frank Shapley who actually painted a portrait of a house on Harley Street that people will see, 16 Harley Street. A woman named Chansonetta Stanley Emmons, who is a photographer. She was the sister of the Stanley Steamer boys.
Oh.
She was a very well-known photographer. There's also an Impressionist painter named Edmund Tarbell, who had family connections in the neighborhood and actually lived on Alban Street for a number of years. And then then going more recently, we've always had artists and architects. It's really interesting to see that that's part of, must be something in the water. But then, and there were architects who actually lived in the neighborhood and designed houses in the neighborhood as well. So Harrison Henry Atwood, who was a city architect, designed his own house on Alban Street as well as a couple of others.
And you had mentioned, Vicki, that architecture as a profession was actually just starting to become a thing, right?
Yeah, the MIT first set up an architectural program in the 1860s.
Okay. And I think Boston Architectural College was 1880s, 1890s. So
no, I think they were I don't know. But architecture as a profession was something where you'd go off to Europe and study, as with painting. But in a lot of cases, a lot of the houses, not so much in our immediate neighborhood, a lot of them were architect designed, but even I would say in our neighborhood, in some of the the more recent or the more less imposing houses, but there were carpenter builders who really developed their skill through practice, or sometimes people would apprentice in an architect's office. A lot of people came actually from the maritime provinces, and where there were boat builders and carpenters, and they had those skills. And I think the attraction in Boston after 1870 was that there was a lot of potential employment.
Yeah.
So that was part of it. But
so what was the cultural vibe in Ashmont Hill at the time? Was it fairly mixed?
The cultural vibe.
I mean, if you had people coming down from the maritime provinces, there's a little bit of Celtic influence there, and then
well, they were more English.
Okay.
But there were also a lot of Irish. A lot of the people who were some of the early residents were first or second generation immigrants. A lot of them from Ireland, Northern Ireland. So it was a mix, but the culture. There was a lot of society, social activities. There was a gentleman's driving club. That,
over in Talbot Avenue.
That over in where's Franklin Field, people would have basically
the
horse
buggies.
races. Yeah.
Okay.
People had whist parties.
Wait, what? What's that?
Whist is like bridge.
Okay.
So, but and then I think there was also there were also a number of people in the neighborhood who were instrumental in the construction of the Dorchester Temple Baptist Church, which is at the corner of Wells Avenue and Washington Street. So there was
And that was the wood shakes, right? Is
it's
that
shingle style.
Shingles,
It's
yeah.
shingle
Yes.
style.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, talk a little bit more about how that has translated to Ashmont Hill today. And you're the president of the Civic Association.
The Ashmont Hill Association was established in 1970, which I was just thinking was kind of interesting. It was just 100 years after the neighborhood first was founded, if you will.
Okay.
And I mean, I've lived in the neighborhood since 1975.
50
but
years.
50 years, yikes. But I think even earlier and today, a lot of what people appreciate about the neighborhood is the sense of community. And the Ashmont Hill Association, as I said, was started in 1970 by people, some of whom had been in the neighborhood for a very long time, and then others, people who had arrived and sort of brought experiences in other neighborhood settings with them. Thought it was really important for people to know their neighbors and to have a relationship with them. They may not be your best friends, but you could get together with them once a month and discuss neighborhood issues. You could socialize with them to some extent, and I think that still is part of what the strength of the neighborhood is.
Yeah, and there's a lot of obviously there's a lot of still single family old homes there, but there's a lot of them that have become multifamily, correct? And you've got renters and owners and families and
I think the neighborhood may be more diverse than some people think, because there a lot of the houses that were built as multifamilies to begin with, and then there are other the houses that have been divided up over the years. So there's I think we have a Vietnamese population now, Hispanic. There are people of all ages. In recent years, there have been a lot of younger couples coming in, moving in, and either with young children or having children. Those things go in cycles. When we moved to the neighborhood, we didn't have children yet, but we had them pretty soon thereafter, and there were a lot of other families who were sort of in the same place, and there have been cycles over those years of there are a lot of kids, or the kids are all older, or then there's another batch that comes along.
and it's maybe a little bit misleading. There's not a lot of business in that neighborhood, but although Codman Square Library is called that, it's actually in Ashmont Hill, correct?
Yeah, the Codman Square Library which was built in the 1970s, is on the site of what was the Henry L. Pierce Elementary School, which was built at the beginning of the 20th century. Henry L. Pierce was Baker chocolate money.
Okay.
But that was the location of what had been called the Wells Mansion. It's not clear that John Wells, who was George's grandfather, lived there very long, and George certainly didn't live there. But anyway, so the Codman Square Library is there, and there's some corner stores and other shops along Washington Street in the apartment buildings that are also within the neighborhood that are really wonderful architecturally and have been there for a long time as well. But no, there's really no. Maybe O'Brien's Market you could count.
Can claim that one.
Claim that one,
Yeah.
and that's again that had connections. There are people who lived in the neighborhood who were the original proprietors of that.
There are some restaurants nearby, which is Tavolo on Dorchester Avenue, and also Gia Canuccia on Dorchester Ave, which are just great.
Yeah. So if people wanted to come check out Ashmont Hill, kind of the encouragement, aside from the event that we're going to talk about in a minute, is really just come check out take a stroll. The gardens are beautiful. I think the architecture is beautiful. If you have a nice weather day, it's a great day to come walk around, and you might see a house that Rose Fitzgerald Kennedy grew up in.
Well, actually, that's a really interesting story. So Rose was born in 1895, I think that is, and her father, John Honey Fitzgerald, was the mayor of Boston, among other things. But so she was born in the North End in 1890. But then the family moved to the neighborhood in 1904, and they moved into a house that was one of the first houses built in the neighborhood in the 1870s, and it had a couple of owners before then. So that then Honey Fitz moved in, and I think Joe had it. There was supposedly a carving in the beech tree in his yard where JFK as a grandchild supposedly climbed up.
Yeah, it said 41, 42.
But so they lived there for quite some time, and Rose graduated from Dorchester High School. She wanted to go to Wellesley College, and she got in, but her father didn't approve of the Protestant ethic of Wellesley, so she ended up being, I think, sent to some convent school in Europe, and before she got married. So the Fitzgeralds owned the house into the 1930s, but after the family had all grown, Honey Fitz and his wife moved into Boston in the mid-1930s, and so the house sat empty.
Okay.
And it had a fire. There was the vandalism, and it's very sad. There's an article that I found in the newspaper of the house is going to be demolished because Honey Fitz says there's no point in keeping a house if you're not living in it.
Oh, he still owned it. They had just moved.
They still owned it, and so I was really furious reading that. If you're not going to live in it, why don't you sell it? But
yeah, that's a very fatalist and extremist viewpoint.
Well, it was the Depression. Who knows?
Yeah.
So they had moved into the city, and they tore it down in 1939.
It got completely torn down.
Oh yeah, it's gone.
It also had a large carriage house.
It had a carriage house. It had tennis courts. It was quite a property from what people. There's a fair amount of sort of neighborhood lore about it. I think that floats around. So it sat there vacant, and Joe, you may remember more about this, but one of the potential uses for the land apparently was to sell it to the post office,
right?
To put in a new post office on Wells Avenue.
Okay.
And the neighbors, in an early act of organization, I guess, got together and vehemently opposed it. So the post office ended up going into a building where there's still sort of the back room of the Codman Square post office at the corner of Wells Avenue and Talbot Avenue.
Yep.
That was originally a car dealership.
Yeah, you can see that.
But you
it
can
looks
imagine,
like a car dealership.
if that had been a post office, Wells Avenue, the whole neighborhood would potentially have been very different.
Yeah.
After
right.
that, just because you would have had this, very large property that probably would have had parking and vehicles coming and going, and so the neighborhood kind of dodged the bullet on that.
Yeah, definitely.
So at some point in the 1950s, the property was sold to a developer from Milton, who hired an architect from Milton, and what sits on that property now are 5 Garrison Colonial homes. Two on Wells Avenue, 3 of them on Harley Street.
Okay,
And the corner is Rose Kennedy Square at the intersection.
Very nice.
But that's all that's left of it.
So Joe, will there be any yard sale vendors on Rose Kennedy Square this weekend?
Well, there'll be 2 on that corner, and then coming up Harley Street, where the most people will be set up. There's May Graves will be selling ribs, and we have a corner lot. We have about 6 families spread out on that. Some from out of the area, but it's fine. They're good people, and hopefully we'll have a good weather.
Yeah. So this isn't just any kind of get your neighbors together impromptu yard sale. This is a big deal. This is on the Boston.gov website. This is consistently. This is year 40?
45.
45.
Yeah, I started getting calls in January.
Oh my gosh.
When's the date? Please, it's a week before Memorial Day. Okay.
Yeah.
So. And right now, people are really signing up. I think 33 so far, but we expect 50 or 60.
Oh, wow. Okay. And how many people come out? I know it's not just the neighbors who walk around. You get folks from all over the place.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah.
Yes. And And they have trouble parking their cars in order to get all the stuff into the cars. But other than that, it's a fun day.
Yeah. What are some cool things people have sold or bought there?
Let me see. I bought a gas station pump,
Okay.
for $20, which is a deal.
All right. What do you do with that?
Oh, it's just sitting in my barn.
Okay.
Quite a while. And they used to have Ashmont Nursery School would have a bunch of families set up on our lawn and just bring all their own stuff. A lot of antiques too. So
Yeah.
it's a good time.
Well, it depends on what your interest is, but
Right.
I think there's always something. And usually there are a lot of, even with the nursery school or in addition, there's a lot of children's toys. Everybody's always looking for big wheels. I don't know if they even make big wheels anymore. Furniture, books, plants.
Right.
I think you had mentioned when we
Kitchenwares.
spoke that there's even some specialty items like architectural details and things that people sell.
Yeah, it's one of these, I call it a clean out the attic basement carriage
Yeah,
house
basement, yeah.
sale. It's a very wide range. There are also some nonprofits that participate.
The Ashmont Nursery School and other groups come in.
Dorchester Historical Society, Dorchester People for Peace, I
Yes.
think has a table this year. So it's really, every year there are certain people who show up regularly. You haven't seen them in a year. There may be people you've known from other years ago for various activities or whatever, and it's almost like old home week, where I haven't seen you since last May, but how are you? And it's great to see you. So a lot of browsing, a lot of and then sometimes children will set up. Our grandchildren always have the things that they're selling on their table.
Yes.
That they, puzzles or games or whatever that they don't really need anymore. They've outgrown, so kids have a chance to, be a little bit entrepreneurial as well.
Oh, that's
That makes
right.
it a lot of fun.
Nice. So remind us again the date and time.
It's Saturday, May 17th, and from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. But if you really want some good stuff, try and get there by 7.
That sounds good. And I know that there's a lot of folks who own businesses, for example, Local Hand and Ripple down on Dot Avenue that borders your neighborhood that get pretty busy and run some specials during that time. So if people are hungry or want to do a little additional browsing, there's some areas down there.
Just a short walk away.
Yeah, exactly. So the last question I have for you both is, where do you go to eat in Dorchester? What's your go-to place?
You've already mentioned them.
You mentioned a couple.
Yeah, Tavolo, Giaconuccia,
Yeah.
and Molinari's.
Molinari's, yeah.
And so
What's your favorite Molinari's pizza? Do you have a go-to?
I always change it. So
Okay, you don't want to
No, I don't
make
wanna.
anybody feel left out.
Do you have any special places you go?
Well, yeah, I would say Tavolo and Via Canuccia, and Tavolo, just about anything. Via Canuccia has had a really good, the rice balls, the soupli are my favorite thing.
Yeah.
It's hard to go wrong at either of those places.
Right, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for coming. We'll send some folks your way, and hopefully we'll keep our fingers crossed for sun, but not too much sun. Perfect amount of
Right. Yeah.
Right.
partial cloudiness.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
and be sure to come early.
And come early. And if you don't make it to the yard sale, or even if you do, take a moment to just take the red line down to Ashmont Hill and check it out, because it's a pretty cool neighborhood.
Can I make a plug for the Historical
Please
Society?
do. Yes.
Yeah, the Dorchester Historical Society has historic properties on Boston Street up by Edward Everett Square, and also the Blake House, which is the oldest house still standing in Boston. But one of the things that we started, I'm on the board there as well as my neighborhood association, during COVID was doing house histories, researching houses in Dorchester and Mattapan. And we have so far done over 500.
Wow.
And a number of them actually are available on the Historical Society's website to read, dorchesterhistoricalsociety.org. But you can also apply to have a house history done. And they're fascinating. And then the other thing that we also offer as part of or in conjunction with that is the house markers that will put the year that a house was completed, plus either the architect or the owner or somebody famous who lived there. And you can also, there's a process for going through that as well. So you can also find information about that on the Historical Society's website.
And if people want to become a member, they
You
can.
want to become a member, you can also join. There's a donate button on the website, and we do programs. We do walking tours. We've got a bunch of events coming up that will be listed on the website, and also in the Dorchester Repoter, which always has our information as well.
Great. Well, Vicki and Joe, thanks so much for coming, and we'll
Thank
see you
you.
tomorrow.
Oh,
Yeah.
you betcha.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
DotLife is supported by the Record Company, Boston's leading provider of accessible music creation spaces. The Record Company is addressing the critical shortage of affordable creative space in our city, serving over 4,000 monthly users across 131 communities. They've preserved 47,000 square feet of professional studio and rehearsal space at rates 60 to 90% below market value, ensuring Boston's musicians have a place to create, regardless of economic means. But they're more than just affordable space. They're building career pathways through partnerships with Bunker Hill Community College, offering professional certification programs that lead to sustainable music careers. This vital work is at risk. As creative spaces continue to disappear across Boston, the Record Company needs community support to maintain these essential resources. Their Amplify Boston campaign directly funds space preservation and career development programs. Visit therecordcompany.org today. That's therecordco.org to donate, become a monthly supporter, or learn about partnership opportunities. Every contribution helps keep Boston's music ecosystem thriving. The Record Company, creating accessible pathways to music creation since 2010. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this week's Tiny Dot Concert. We're here today with Daniel Laurent and Jeff two times. Really excited to have you both here. Jeff, as the existing Dorchester person in the room,
Yes.
I'm going to start with you. Tell me a little bit about your musical history and what brings you to the room today.
My music history goes back,
Way back in the time.
Late 80s, early 90s, been DJing. I'm in a rap group, produced, did a lot. I'm still here.
Say their name.
I don't want to do all that.
I mean, jeez Louise.
Now, I'll let you do that.
Almighty RSO,
Okay.
right? And then Made Men. And you're a part of Wise Guys. Yeah.
Wise Guys.
So
Handmade
it's
Three.
it's a whole
quite the
long
history, yeah.
Yeah, he's
We could be here for hours. That's why I don't want to do all that.
he downplays a lot, and it's just kind of like it's cool, but it's kind of obnoxious because the intro is the intro, right?
Right.
Like, you've heard of Nas before. Like, he has produced for Nas.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Oh, knock it off.
That's right. Jesus Christ.
Okay.
Nas, like the Nas?
The Nas.
Wow.
Exactly.
You should not downplay that.
He's, toured across the world. Source Magazine, Source, what was it, Source Lab?
Source Sound Lab with Ray J and Egypt, and then Source All Access with Lisa Ray and Tretch.
Oh my gosh.
I mean,
That's a pedigree.
he just, like, it just rolls
He's
it.
like, oh, I forgot about
Yeah,
that.
yeah. It must be nice. Okay.
Well, tell us a little bit about you, Daniel.
I mean, I just, I work at a pharmacy. I just, I'm an artist.
Roxbury, but we'll claim part of you.
Roxbury, but
Yeah.
this is the connection,
Yeah.
right? So, in the thing, like, there's a checking in, right? And so, because I checked in, and then I have a connection, he is my gateway, he's my pass. So, when I walk through, when I walk on Dorchester Ave, and I'm actually going to be doing, shout out to State Rep Brandy Fluka Oakley. I'm going to be,
Reed now.
yes, damn,
That's right.
I'm gonna pay
She
for
will
that.
notice that.
I'm going to pay for that.
Yes, you will.
Sorry. I'm walking with her for Dot Day.
Awesome.
Because it's the day after, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so I'm going to be walking with her. So when I walk down the streets, they're like, oh, that's Jeff's guy. You know what I'm saying? So I'm good. So thank you. I'm artist, filmmaker, clothing brand, Black Dollar. I just recently got the trademark, so I own it.
Oh,
So that's,
great.
you know what I'm saying? So, and... community advocate. I'm involved in a lot of different things. I do a lot of advocacy in domestic violence spaces, and yeah.
And how long have you been performing?
A long time. I think with me, it's hard to calculate the time because I never really gave it a full go. I was
Okay.
always doing it while I was working or something else or some project, and it was always,
On the side.
like 30%.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? So, however, I think when I look at certain people, and I don't want to make it, Boston specific. But when I look at certain artists who are like aging, they're not aging well, and I don't mean aesthetically. I just mean like they're not sharp, and it's just kind of like they're being wheeled out and performing, and then so for me, it's important. Like I look at people who I'm inspired by, past, present, and I always constantly want to be better. So
Yeah.
even the performance piece, there's different ways that I try to like attack a song, or I call it dancing. So there's certain ways. So like the All Money In record, the line is, I've been grinding all my existence. Past few years, I've lost a couple of friendships. But what I was like, I've been grinding all my existence. Past few years, I lost a couple of friendships. Full steam ahead. So it's like little weaving in and out.
Yeah.
That like a musical ear would get.
Right.
But like someone else would be like, oh, yeah, it's a cool record. So anyway. That's a very long intro, but it is what it is.
That's okay. So you are also no stranger to the podcast scene. You've got a couple of themes under your belt, I believe. Tell me a little bit more about your podcasting background.
Wedlocked and Loaded with my manager, as Jeff calls her.
Management.
Yeah, what are you going to do? So my wife, Leah, who's actually the star of Cry For Me also.
Okay.
So we do episodes. It comes out every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Actually haven't done it in the past maybe 2 weeks. Life is life in. However, like it's super important, and we're up to maybe 140 episodes, or maybe more. It
I
might
can't
be like
wait
100
to be there. That's impressive.
Yeah, but and the thing is, a lot of people, it was this whole big podcast explosion, and everybody was doing a podcast. Mm-hmm. And after 4 podcast releases, they disappear because no one has consistency. People thought that they were going to be quick money grabs.
Right.
Like the editing.
Or quick attention grabs.
Yeah, and it just doesn't, like, you have to
It's
be.
It's hard.
Yeah. And
we can talk about how hard it is. Harder than I expected.
And I'm even seeing from the episodes that I saw, I see like you did something on this episode and you made it a point not to do it on this episode. So like I'm seeing it in real time, right? So like, but a lot of people are it's just, I don't know. And that's part of what me, even with not being fully dedicated into, art creating, I've always been doing something forever, right? And that's why I take my hat off to like people like Terminology, who he lived and breathed it every single day.
Yeah.
Right? Like eating ramen noodles or whatever he had to do, but every single day he was a rapper.
Committed to it.
Yeah.
And
so you have to have that level in order to, the 10,000 hours?
Yeah.
That's a real thing. So a lot of people have done 150 hours, and
they get tired or they get bored.
Yeah, but God bless. Stay away from me. I have stuff. I want to only be with the 10,000 hour people.
Yeah.
I don't
you
have
and
time.
we got to talk offline about collaborating artistically with your partner, because there's some lessons to figure out there. We're loving it. But man, it's a different dimension to the relationship.
It is, and it's
talking about the struggle.
it's and I will say, just to put a button on the Wedlocked and Loaded piece, is 2 things. One, coming up with it, I really wanted to have a podcast experience. And what I was seeing, and I still see, is a lot of people will say they have podcasts, and it's just an internet live. It's just an Instagram live, or it's just a Facebook live.
And it's just a stream of consciousness. There's no real thoughtfulness to it.
And so, like, and then do you have, like, a hub? Like, I've always been big on having a a hub of where like I would live, right? So even back in the MySpace days, I was one of the only artists that bought a domain name and had a website.
Okay.
Because I always said, what happens if MySpace goes down? And then we see what
And
happens.
all of your assets are there. Then yeah.
So
Were you friends with Tom?
Tom, that guy, man. Jeez,
Where'd he go?
He's
I miss
such
Tom.
Yeah, good old Tom. Tom cashed out. That's what Tom did.
Tom was smart.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, but the Wedlocked and Loaded. So I wanted to make it a real podcast experience, and then also I wanted to master the audio experience before making it video. And I just felt that was a better way to like gradually grow and not do video and then you can't keep up with it or it doesn't look the way you want it to look. So, I was intentional about it, Leah also, and we wanted it to be the presentation that we put out.
And you mentioned Cry For Me.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about
Cry
that.
For Me, it's a short film, 20 minutes. It's won, I think, 34 awards to this date, like 45 film festivals. I wrote the song Cry For Me. I wrote the video and wrote the short film, co-directed it, produced it, executive produced it.
Wow.
Maxed out credit cards. Did scout location, all the things.
Was it shot in Boston?
Some of it, and then some of it was, I think, Dover. I think that was a house. I found this house, and it was an arm and a leg and 2 fingers. But it was an important character in the movie, so I had to have that house.
Dover, New Hampshire?
Dover, Mass.
Dover, Mass. Okay.
I think Dover, Mass. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was Dover, Mass. And so, I'm proud of it. There's definitely things as a creative, I'm like watching it, I see stuff.
Yeah.
But, it is what it is.
Where
But,
can people find that?
So it's purposely not readily available online because 2 things. One, it's in consideration for 3 different film festivals.
Okay.
And part of those requirements is you can't have it like online and for people to just see whenever they want. And then 2, I don't know what the next iteration is and what I'm going to do with it. And so there's a FOMO element to it. So when people see that it's going to be screened, they're like, oh, I got to come see it. I heard about it.
Right. And I can't see it anywhere else right
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
And so I've been using it for educational. I did something with teen empowerment, did something with Boston Public Schools, and I'm intentionally talking to young people, young men in particular. And I always say that, of course, men are abused also, just not as disproportionate. The numbers are just not even in the same stratosphere. But I'm trying to have course correction.
Yeah.
So I'm talking to young men, older men with like different, behaviors and trying to fix certain things and trying to prevent the next victim turned survivor. And with the whole Diddy and Cassie thing, it's all in the zeitgeist. Like people have their opinions. How come she didn't leave? And, she was on a gravy train till it wasn't.
Right.
And it's like, I'm silent because that's just not how it works.
No.
And the stats are, it typically takes 7 times, the attempts of 7 times to leave before you successfully leave.
And that's when you're not with someone who owns your entire career
Well,
in their future.
It's that part.
So the power imbalance.
And
is-
she's a beautiful girl, but
Yeah.
like, I don't know if she was the most talented. I don't
Right.
think that's a secret, right?
Right.
So, I mean,
Yeah. It's
anyway,
a whole different podcast episode.
it's a whole different podcast. But anyway,
So how did Daniel and Jeff, how did you guys connect?
man.
Yeah, that's crazy. How do we connect?
I didn't warn you about this question.
Do you even know?
Wait a minute. Well, I did radio, so I would get his music. That's how the
Before that.
relationship. We would get me the music, and we just stayed in touch and communicated a lot. That's crazy.
No, because this is before 80. Because you weren't on Hot. You weren't on Hot. You were on 87.
Yeah, 87.
But like we had a relation. I mean, I don't know how that sounds.
You don't want to say that.
I know,
Not
but
a
we
relationship
were
like that.
we were in community before 87 for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean I don't know. Anyway, I think it's one of those things where like it was always a genuine mutual respect in a real way from both of us, and we would have like real conversations, and
And just like in the same circles for a while and then
we also got to keep in mind that we share the same birthday,
You do?
The exact same, yeah.
What day?
September 6th.
Yeah.
September. Nice.
Which is, yeah. So Virgos is
yeah.
and we think differently, and
Yeah,
whether that
my-
gets
Yeah.
See,
yeah.
like if he's having a bad day, if something's on his mind, he'll call me.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah, because you think the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if he's feeling away, he'll call me like, and I talk
Yeah.
to him. By the time we hang up, he's
yeah.
you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Now
I'm an Aries, so that whole, it's very different thought processing.
very
system.
different,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's people have their opinions about Virgos, but the reality is like Virgos are very process systems oriented. And I think in a world of chaos and people just doing whatever they want to do, they're not going to so much understand and or appreciate Virgos.
Yeah.
And in turn, I don't so much appreciate most of y'all. So, so it's a perfect, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about your music choices, your styles. Did you adjust your style at all when you got together with Jeff two-time or?
Honestly, right? Always. Now I know. Always liked what he was doing.
Okay.
For number one, like he's real hip hop, and I always felt that his name to me should come up in more conversations with a lot of these other guys.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. Like because he's definitely nice at what he does, and that's my thing with him. Always like whenever he calls me, I'm always gonna pick up. He ever needs me to do something, I'm always gonna be there because I believe in what he got going on, as I always did from day one.
And that means a lot because he doesn't, he's not readily available for everybody.
Nah.
You know, and that doesn't come from a paycheck attached to it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But at the same token, I'm always very mindful of, I know in my heart, if I need him for some performance that I'm doing on Mass and Cass in the middle of the street, right? And I just want to stand in front and perform. And I'm like, yo, I need you. He'll show up. However, when there's opportunities where he can make a couple of dollars or make a little more than a couple of dollars, I'm always doing that also to balance it out.
Yeah.
You know, and so whether it's weddings and bar mitzvahs and divorce parties, you haven't done a divorce party yet, have you?
Are those more popular? Are you seeing those?
Man,
You never know.
you know how relationships go. You know, to have and to hold, to death do us part. Sometimes people die a little sooner. I digress.
Another whole episode.
That's another one. Yeah,
Management, I have no control.
I know. I'm gonna hear about it as soon as this airs. So this will be fodder for the next podcast. For
That's
sure.
right. I'm gonna have to tune into yours to hear how she responds.
Yeah, we've had some really good ones. One of the highest viewed ones, we're like over 30,000 downloads, I think, like hard downloads.
Nice.
One of the highest rated ones was we interviewed the Flirty Swingers.
Ooh, that sounds intriguing.
And so it's a couple, and I think they both were married before, and they're together, and it was just a normal conversation about the matriculation of their relationship and how they got to this point. And they're big on social media. It's a whole big thing. But
For those of you who are just listening to this, Jeff is shaking his head actively at the Flirty Swingers.
yeah, that's not his bag. I'm intrigued by stuff like that,
Yeah,
right?
it's interesting.
Like,
Yeah.
I know that I can't have a life where that's just kind of what it is, but I'm very intrigued by it. I always have been, you know, that he's much more conservative in that regards. Like, do you do, I mean, it's a wild question. Do you do PDA? Do you like kiss in public?
Yeah, you have to.
Okay. I would see him like, babe, don't do that. Wait,
Nah.
now you're not like going crazy.
Nah, I'm not going crazy.
Okay, yeah.
Like,
You're not doing
You're not-
public makeouts or anything.
Yeah,
I mean,
like that's me. I'm in
Yeah?
Washington Park, like going crazy.
the crazy thing, I always said I just want to like just make out in public, like, you know what I mean?
Go for it
Yeah, do it.
Yeah.
at Dorchester.
This is a family event.
I don't think my girl's gonna be there. I just can't just make out.
Is
with
it
anybody.
family? No, you said that the kids are gonna be earlier,
I mean, there's kids all day. You
but
know,
that's how they get here.
that's true.
So
That's true.
yeah,
And by the way, it doesn't have to be your girl. Okay.
No.
Flirty swingers.
No way.
So bringing it back.
Trying to get him jammed up. Hey, man.
Yeah.
All right.
Bringing it back to Dorch Fest. So you guys are going to be there. You're going to be there, I think, at 1 o'clock. I got to check the schedule, but I'm pretty sure you're in the early slot, and you're going to be at 104 Beaumont. So we have Beaumont Street closed this year.
Yeah.
You guys can come down and walk around and not worry about traffic, which would be great.
That's
It's
good.
going to be a pretty busy.
We don't want to be hit.
Busy site. Yeah. No hitting. Where else can people catch you guys?
Do you have anything?
I just got a new time slot on 88.9 Saturdays from 5 to 6.
Okay.
Legendary 88.9.
Yeah.
Wait, now back, we must, I'm going to, you know what? I'm going to try to figure this out. Because back when, so funny story about 88.9, my record, and it was like verified by people at the time, was the most requested record by a local or national artist on 88.9.
Wow.
And that was Masterpiece. And I seen somebody last night who served like, he did like an 18-year, bid in jail. Right. And he was like, dang, Laurent, you had that record. Oh, man. And same thing with Neil. Neil would tell me that. And so, it's always power of music is beautiful. Yeah. Anyway, I digress. That's 88.9, the legendary 88.9.
So tell us a little bit more about your inspirations. Where do you draw you write your songs?
Yeah.
Where do you draw your inspirations from? Is it?
I'm no Drake. I think people that come to mind now, Pac, Tupac, Nas, Nipsey, Killer Mike, Royce the 5'9", and do you remember that? What happened with the live? So Almighty RSO, right? Ray Dog, which then matriculated to Benzino, right? A lot of people know Benzino from like reality TV shows and all those different things. Mm-hmm. We did our COVID MC, and we did an Instagram live, and Benzino, because they're group mates, right, and friends, Benzino joined, and we were just having a conversation. His daughter's Coyle Ray too.
Okay.
So it's a whole, right? So we talked about that and talked about whatever. And so I was saying like, yeah, one of my favorite groups is Slaughterhouse, because it is,
okay,
right? Joe Budden, Royce the 5'9", Crooked Eye, and Joel Ortiz. I completely forgot that Royce the 5'9", who is friends with Eminem, and Benzino just have issues, and it was like public threats online. It was a whole, so like I'm like telling Benzino like, yeah, my favorite is, and it like, yeah.
How'd that go over?
It didn't go over too bad.
It wasn't crazy, but like I was genuinely being sincere about my admiration for these. And
when it clicked, did you backtrack?
No, the show was over.
Okay.
And I went and looked on, because there's a video on YouTube with Royce like going crazy at him, and bazookas are involved. It's crazy.
Oh my gosh.
Exactly. So I forgot, and I'm like, oh no. But anyway,
well, yeah,
it is what it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think the way Killer Mike in particular, it's not that I love all of his music, but the way he is able to blend his activism and social consciousness into his music without feeling preachy is very like inspiring to me.
It's a tough line to tread. Yeah.
Because I don't, like Public Enemy, love them, right? But like, I just always felt like, bass, how low can you go? And it's like, I don't, you know what I mean? So blending the worlds is very tricky, and Royce the 5'9", I feel like does it really well also. So those are who I look to. And Kendrick now, and I guess always, but like now he's super inspirational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how often do you write new music?
Not as much as shout out to Rex. I mean, I'm sure he writes every morning. I write when I have something to say.
Okay.
When I leave from here, I'm going to record a record that it took me probably 3 months to write. And I write a song in 10 minutes. But this new record that I wrote, I wanted it to be perfect. and I wanted it to be organic and for me to like, so I would listen to the beat every day for 3 months. And then I finally sat down, and you know what? I was at 19 Keys. 19 Keys was here, and I think I went in the bathroom and like locked the stall and went on my, and stand, I didn't sit down, like not TMI, but I locked the stall and I stood up and I was on my phone typing. And I got like the first half of the song, and then I finished it later. So
You
I'm
gotta
going
write when the inspiration hits.
Yeah. So that's how that goes. And I don't believe in just fluff. I was never one of those people that had, 40 mixtapes, and like I say what needs to be said, and otherwise, like I don't take a record that's a really big record, and then I want to do it over and remix it.
Okay.
Like the arrogance of you to feel like the record wasn't good enough. Now your voice has to be on it. But that's a dumb rapper thing.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Do you mind performing a few tracks here?
Sure.
That'd be great.
Let me figure out what I'm going to perform.
All
Okay.
right. Cool. Well, thank you both.
Is
for
Jeff
coming.
going to be behind me on the ones and twos?
We'll see. We'll see.
Man, stay tuned.
And we're live. We're rolling. So my name is Daniel Laurent. I'll be one of the featured artists this year's Dorch Fest. Jeff 2 times gonna be on the ones and twos. They still say that? Yeah, I've been grinding on my existence. Past few years I lost a couple of friendships. Full steam ahead, never ending. I'm writing scriptures at the state of the city with the mayor's private admittance. I'm trying to remain civil though. Boy, I tell you, they intentionally making it difficult. Each and every step, they put up some obstacles. Learn from the great Sean Corey, the streets watching you. If I kill you, I'm brainless. Clout chasing viral moments, making them famous. Trying to stay out the way, bro. Black Dollar, the movement and mission I'm building, they know. Hustler spirit, hear it throughout my tone. Intentional with the poetry, purposely in my zone. I'm well respected, tab ain't cost a dime. My credit was good before my first credit card with a line. I'm feeling good, getting so better with time. Built my castle brick by brick, finally say it's mine. Family dysfunctions, choose to put in rhymes instead of more hours on a therapist's couch with the blinds. Link with Kamo and Diamond was impressed, sent this record and now it's prepared for you to digest. Putting a pause on the cheers and the toast, all money in till we victory lapping with blue notes, yeah. Alright, so that was just a little preview. We got a whole set prepared. I don't want to unveil all the magic here, right? But just a little taste of what we're gonna do. So this is a record nobody knows. It's actually a new visual experience I have coming out, and it's probably one of my most personal records. Yeah, my heart was broke many times, many faces, spaces, many times, Friends and family equally. Now I don't answer my phone so frequently. Narratives float, DL don't speak to me. Focus is to protect inner peacefully, and by that I gotta stay by my lonesome. New me 3.0, yes I'm on one. Force field around just in case the foes come. I'm looking for consistency if anyone knows some. I'm no longer concerned where so-and-so's from. I'm a hustler, connect with like minds even if the smoke come. Keep that energy if you type it. My posts are mine and you don't have to like it. A lot of Kool-Aid drinkers I see on timelines. Communities in ruin seeking power in prime time. Even those I respect, the next can't stand them. Complicated reverence like victims of handguns. Honor no longer as I once knew it. Distant associates to some I was cool with. Sink the pool in the corner with my pool stick. I had to unfollow some that I grew with. Just cause we from the hood, it don't mean I fool with. Opposed to one from a different hood that I shoot with. Bow. Shout out to D-Quest. Shout out to Latia LaRock. And fun fact, this record actually inspired the Native Land podcast theme song. So shout out to Angela Rye, Tiffany Cross, and Andrew Gillum. You know, that's one of the proud moments. Yeah, I'm a creator and an executor. I don't think pie in the sky, no roofers. It's plain practical approach. No need to reinvent the Tesla wheel or Ford scooters. You want Kirby demos or store Hoovers. You want a team full of passers or mixed shooters? You pick your path, don't fold to the stress. Try one, don't work, don't quit, on to the next. Self-made is the best way I know how to get it out the mud. My only road to success. Never played a full game of chess, but I know it's the game of life. 20, 40 is at best. Everyone wants it now and they can't wait later. I pay my tab plus tips, don't owe favors. Held down the household when I grew pubics. I'm jaded through that time, but glad I grew through it. As an adult, I'm now able to move fluid. I'm thinking on the fly and adapt to the new rubrics. Stay far from timid heart moves when it's in tune with. No new friends, bad habits, I'm used to it. Primo quality or else I can't move it. Lee Denham Beaner and Thames, I just bruce it. Loss of loved ones is fuel to go harder. Peace to Dad, Tosh One, and Mr. Garner. Love. So catch us at the George Fest 2025. I don't want to speak, I don't have the exact address, but this is where you'll put it, like right here, right? I'm ad-libbing, but I think the address will be like right here. I'm gonna look stupid if it's not. Anyway, I'm Daniel Laurent, catching me and Jeff 2 times. Yep.
Thank you for listening to DotLife, which is available on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. DotLife is produced and edited by me, Aaron Caldwell. Technical support is provided by Yasser Mahmoud. Additional support is provided by the Dorchester Repoter and the Record Company. Thanks to Vicki, Rugo, Joe Gildea, Bill Forry, Daniel Laurent, and Jeff 2 times for joining this week's show. If you're interested in supporting the podcast, visit dotlifepod.com for more information.